I did a video looking at the subject of taxing the rich as it's become a topic of discussion again after the rise of a certain prominent YouTuber who's appearing on all forms of podcasts and mainstream media. Whilst I focused on income tax, I'd like to look into the other part of the argument that some form of wealth tax on the rich, rather than focusing on individuals, could aim more at corporations. So big business has accelerated in numbers, size and growth since the end of the Second World War and has rocketed to new heights, buoyed along by the new digital world we've lived in for the past quarter century and the globalization of goods and services, partly driven by a need to connect with different parts of the planet, but mainly to exchange what we might not have for what we can offer. Capitalism, the overarching ideology where the economic system in which a society's means of production are held by private individuals or organisations, not the government, and where products, prices and the distribution of goods are determined mainly by competition in a free market. That seems to be the definition. So it's a system that's lifted a lot of people out of poverty, and whilst it has its flaws, and I'm not here to argue for or against such at this point, a purely socialist system has never worked anywhere, and so there's no one as yet to implement anything better. It's the framework we have, and to get into the tax situation, I won't be doing anything too out there to break those rules as such, possibly. It's far from ideal, and so with some tweaks, we could effectively level the playing field a little, so let's have a think about it. A wealth tax is levied on the rich through assets is the first point to look at. There's ideas about a 2% tax on the wealthy. It's supposedly able to deliver a £24 billion tax receipt, but it's not exactly plain sailing when it comes down to it. So for starters, if we're talking about someone's assets, these are notoriously hard to find and value, as certain things can be hidden and certain things appreciate or depreciate. So who will be the arbiter of what things are worth? It really isn't straightforward. And then also, are they looking to tax them on assets they buy, own, or both? So Tax Justice at UK, for example, are advocating for this 2% on assets with no information on how they think it would be done. As they probably know, it's virtually impossible unless the government came up with a ton of legislation they could attempt to enforce, itself being unwieldy, unworkable, and at a fairly big cost. I mean, we can barely get basic taxation at a basic level correct. How is HMRC going to go through all rich people's assets and make some kind of adjudication on their worth? The super rich would hire lawyers and tie them up in litigation in perpetuity, I would imagine, plus the amount of staff and the cost to go through this would be quite considerable, but possibly worth it, who knows? So there's the applying national insurance to the investment income. Well, that's a non-starter. I mean, whilst technically NI is a form of taxation, it was meant to be for the purpose of paying for the NHS and possibly a bit towards a pension. It's definitely not for this. And we already have capital gains tax, though that could be tightened up possibly. Equalising income tax rates across the board with what you would get from stock shares and other commodities would prevent lower level investors from investing. So charging people 20%, 40% and the top rate of 45% on investments is nuts. Also, when you're charging this as a purchase or realisation, I've seen some mad people say we should tax unrealised assets, which is absurd, but either way you do it, it would have a pretty big effect on the stock market, if not devastating. So that would affect everybody, rich and the ordinary working person who's put a little money into a few small investments to either boost their earnings or pension. That'd probably go down. The last point about tax havens here is, again, ridiculous. There's no way on this green and blue earth that every nation will come together to determine global minimum tax rates, for the simple reason that no economy is the same. It just shows that those on the left often really have no idea of what they're talking about. A lot of this is down to just sheer rage at the super wealthy, not rational, logical thinking. The kind of people that would scream and cry about crypto when they had the opportunity to invest in Bitcoin, they didn't invest in Bitcoin, and when they had the chance, and then they complain about it when it got big. I mean, I'm not a big fan of crypto, by the way, but you get the point. A lot of the vitriol is targeted at one of the guys in the thumbnail, Elon Musk. Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, they catch a lot of stick, but I mean, you've got Elon Musk, you've got Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, some of the richest people around, but Zuckerberg and Bezos don't actually attract so much ire as they're a bit more left, although the Zuck seems to be coming round to the right ideas. And those three they're some of the wealthiest on the planet, and each has given a lot to the world, for better or worse, depending on your world view. But how should we tackle this huge wealth inequality between those at the very top and those at the bottom? Well, I think firstly we need to stop with the hyperbole in the West a little bit. Whilst comparatively it might seem like we're really poor, most people watching this video, for example, have a roof over their head, food, sanitation, possibly an income, a device to watch this on. We are not living in Victorian England when there was real living on the streets type poverty, nor are we in a country that has slums and millions of people, especially children, who live in absolutely dire conditions. We have it okay in the West, and yes, there is a big disparity between those at the top and the bottom, but nowhere near India, for example. I mean, they have some of the richest people in the world, a fair amount of resources, and they still have terrible living conditions for like hundreds of millions. That's real inequality, especially as it is their government that could do something about that, but choose not to. So back to our first world problems. Yes, it would be nice if we all earned a little more and had to pay a little less when you're in the 20% income tax bracket or below. But let's focus on the positives and try and find a suitable solution. Or equitable solution, which has been the buzzword of choice for a decade. But someone's abilities are not a matter of equity. This is something we've got to really start understanding. There are very few people who could have done what Elon Musk has, for example. If we must punish the wealthy, let's look at how best we can do it as to avoid looking like the grubby little freeloaders we all are. The argument is that there's too much wealth at the top of the system, so somehow we must curtail it. So let's look at capital gains tax. So capital gains tax, if you didn't know, is a tax on the profit when you sell or dispose of something, which is normally an asset. That's gone up in value. It's the gain on which you're taxed, so not the money you receive. So it's the difference between the price you pay and the price that you sell. There's a £3,000 allowance before the basic rate of capital gains tax starts, and that's set at 18%, and it goes up to a start point of 24% for higher earners. It's a charge that covers a range of things. It includes selling personal possessions worth over £6,000. It doesn't include cars. But we pay far too much tax on far too many things, don't we? It's crazy. Some would like to see these levels the same as income tax levels, but I think that's way, way too much. And the level is, again, already incredibly high. Charging more in this area would, again, not hit rich people as hard as it would hit the middle classes, for example. So I just don't see it as viable. Then moving on to the biggie of corporation tax. This is where you can find some common ground with the tax the rich bunch. There is active tax avoidance, and this is an area that definitely could be targeted. So we know all the big tech firms, Amazon, Google, Adobe, Microsoft, Cisco, they all avoided paying the real amounts of corporation tax in Europe recently. And it's been documented from many groups. So this one from TaxWatch, some of these companies here, well, they've avoided in the millions, others it's been hundreds of millions. Whilst the figures aren't always entirely accurate from these people, the estimate of about 2.3 billion lost to tax is fairly significant, and surely there would be more to find from various other companies and other sectors. So just having the political will to close the legal loophole of moving monies around to avoid tax would bring a decent amount into government. One way was something I spoke of briefly in another video, that would turn the business world upside down a little bit, but it could ensure fairness, and that's taxing huge companies on their revenue and not on their profit. But hold on, surely this is a liberal policy. Whilst I agree it's a little bit radical, and fairness is normally how I look at things, when huge multinational corporations are not playing fair, and they're not, it's fine to go after them. I have nothing against individuals who work hard and earn huge money. I'm not willing to defend these huge companies that cannot do the right thing at all. Just no way. So my idea is to simply tax them on revenue, not profit, but at a certain top level. So once your company's revenue exceeds a certain threshold, and that could be, you can make it whatever, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, whatever works, and call it what you want. You can keep corporation tax on profits only, underneath that first basic level you settle on. Little one-man bands, smaller businesses, which is the bulk of things, carry on paying small amounts of corporation tax. Medium-sized businesses have large revenue, they'd pay a little bit more. Then bigger companies have to cough up what they really should pay. So be it at the same level of the 10, 20 and 30% bands I suggested previously for income tax, but maybe with the top rate being reserved for companies that earn over, say, 150 million, this would solve a lot of problems. You could make this charge the only thing that they pay, simplifying the system, but they would have to pay it. Then the obvious downsides, obviously the motley trio of people I mentioned previously, amongst others, would probably have a heart attack at this proposal. They'd probably threaten to quit the UK, but I'm not so sure that they would. You'd have to close any legal loophole from shifting revenues around and pretending that they either come from somewhere else or they didn't actually earn them in this country, which would be just pure lies, and it's what a lot of companies do and get away with. You could say that this is disproportionately going after the rich, but as it's not individuals, it's less vindictive and it's more aligned with what a broad range of people in the UK and across the globe would be comfortable with, and still gives the individuals the freedom to earn a lot. Even free market capitalists, you guys have got a lot to answer for, and I'm not actually a socialist. You have to concede that we have to find a solution to these issues, and it's something I'm hearing from right-wingers more just recently. We have to look to strike a balance when attempting to rein in these gargantuan entities, as the damage they've done and continue to do is enormous. So yeah, there are benefits to having certain large firms. Their buying power alone can drive down costs and prices of goods, but once they get to a size where they are law unto themselves, that's got to be curtailed, really. Again, if you saw my previous video, I'm not in favour of this approach with individuals, but with a collective trying to seek absolute power, that's really unhealthy and something we really should seek a remedy to. Of course, you could go for something less radical if you wanted to stay in the current system, though I really feel it's time for a sweeping change. Whilst they have the name, it's not something I'd expect from Reform, for example, as they seem to be very Tory light and quite pro-business, so who knows where we'll end up come the next government if they get in. Our Monopolies and Mergers Commission, or Competition Commission as it's now called, seems pretty toothless and completely unable to challenge these monetary monoliths. So this could be a way to do it. It's just an idea. Obviously there are vested interests and lobbying groups that would need to be overcome, and it would take a radical party to even come up with such a plan, so I'm not holding my breath. It's not so much of a plan, but more an idea, and we need ideas, as the current system is so broken. It's making people crazy enough to start believing in going after people and not giant economic institutions.